The only sound piercing the quiet was the engine's faint ticking as it cooled after shutdown. It was one of those oppressively humid summer afternoons when the air clings heavily, refusing to move. My wife Emily sat in the passenger seat next to me, fiddling with the strap on her brace before grabbing her cane. We had just returned from her physical therapy session, and exhaustion weighed on her deeply, the kind that settles into every joint and muscle. Before we could even pull fully into the driveway, however, she appeared. Karen stood there at the border of our lawn, her hair lacquered into an immovable shell of neighborhood control, lips sealed as tightly as a sealed safe, clipboard gripped like a battle-ready instrument. She was fixated on the tiny strip of grass that, according to her, breached HOA section 4B's rules on uniform lawn appearance. "Afternoon," I said, forcing my voice to stay even and calm. She paused before answering. Her gaze slid past me toward Emily, who was working hard just to steady herself. That familiar judgmental expression, the one designed to shrink you, flashed across her features instinctively. "You've received 2 warnings already about that ramp," Karen stated, tapping her clipboard sharply. "It lacks HOA approval. The wood color fails to comply with community standards." I glanced at her, then at the ramp, the one I had constructed myself so my wife could get into our house independently instead of relying on me to lift her each time. "It's not for looks," I replied. "It's necessary for her wheelchair." Karen let out a long sigh, as though accommodations for disability somehow disrupted her perfect vision of order. "Rules exist for a reason, Mr. Dalton. Remove it by Friday, or fines will follow." Emily's voice came out soft and unsteady. "It's only a ramp, please." But Karen had already pivoted away. She snapped the clipboard closed with finality, her heels striking the pavement in precise, rhythmic clicks that echoed like a command. I watched her retreat down the sidewalk. The sky behind her grew darker, thick clouds gathering low and ominous, as if nature itself disapproved of the scene unfolding below. I had no idea then just how far that woman would go, because 2 days later, that clipboard turned into something far more dangerous. And my wife never crossed the threshold of our home again. The storm arrived with fury that Friday night, as though the heavens wanted to weigh in on the matter. Wind howled through the eaves, and rain drummed against the house like restless knocking. Emily rested indoors on the couch, a blanket draped over her legs. I was out in the garage, securing the final bolts on an additional handrail I had added to the ramp for extra safety. Then came the sound that shattered the steady patter, not lightning off the downpour, but the abrupt screech of tires, followed by a car door banging shut. Karen emerged through the sheets of rain, umbrella angled forward like a barrier, clipboard still clutched tightly, her HOA badge catching the dim glow of the porch lamp. She strode purposefully toward me. "Mr. Dalton," she shouted over the gusts, "I instructed you to dismantle that structure." I placed the wrench aside. "It's a ramp, Karen, built for my wife. You insist on labeling it a structure, as if it's some ugly addition instead of a basic need." She advanced a step, water sliding from her umbrella's edges. "Do you believe your situation grants you special privileges? Every violation begins with an excuse. Before long, the entire neighborhood deteriorates into chaos. Karen, she literally cannot walk. I don't care." She cut in sharply, her eyes tightening. "You've had your chances. The board met this morning and approved the enforcement action. A formal removal notice is in effect." Emily must have caught the raised voices, because the front door eased open behind me. "Please," she murmured weakly, "just let us be." Karen spun toward her, and for an instant her expression shifted, not rage, but a chilling kind of quiet triumph. "You both act entitled, thinking your husband's military background excuses everything," she said coldly. "Not in this community." I moved closer. "Be careful what you say." Her face remained stony. "You have until morning. After that, I will take care of it personally." And she wasn't bluffing, because the following morning, when I stepped out for coffee, the ramp had vanished. It lay in pieces, scattered nails, broken boards, and jagged fragments strewn across the ground like battlefield remnants. Emily stood frozen at the doorway, gazing at the destruction in silence. She attempted one uncertain step forward. Her cane shook violently in her hand. Before I could close the distance, the heavy impact sounded. She collapsed onto the concrete, motionless. Everything fell eerily quiet except for the raw scream that ripped from my throat. You never truly hear your own cry in that moment. It simply escapes. Emily remained still on the rain-slicked pavement, water saturating her clothing, the cane lying several feet away. I fell to my knees next to her, fingers trembling so fiercely, I'd hardly managed the phone to call 911. The operator's instructions blended into the rolling thunder. "Sir, remain on the line." But her words barely registered. All I saw was Emily's shallow breathing, her face drained of color. The ambulance crew arrived swiftly, almost too swiftly, as if they had been summoned in advance. Perhaps because Karen had already dialed them. She waited on the opposite side of the street, arms crossed, umbrella raised, expression utterly neutral. As the paramedics carefully transferred Emily to the stretcher, her eyes stayed closed. I trailed them to the ambulance in a daze, drenched and hollow, staring at the flashing red lights glinting off Karen's perfectly polished nails while she pretended to speak into her phone, likely reporting to the HOA board, no doubt taking pride in her victory for compliance. At the hospital, the world dissolved into haze. The sharp sting of disinfectant filled the air, the heart monitor emitted its monotonous flatline, and the doctor's measured words landed like blows no spouse should ever endure. Severe cranial injury. She lost her footing. The fall proved lethal. No, I'm thinking she didn't lose her footing. She fell because that ramp had been ripped away. When the officers arrived to record my account, they remained courteous yet distant, treating it as one more routine suburban mishap. "Sir, the HOA maintains that the ramp contravened municipal ordinances," one explained. "They were legally entitled to dismantle it. They murdered her," I told them. He jotted a note without looking up. "We'll classify it as an accidental fatality at this stage." As they departed, I caught sight of Karen through the window, conversing with one of the policemen as though they shared a long-standing acquaintance. She glanced up, locked eyes with me, and offered that small, self-satisfied smirk. The sight seared itself permanently into my memory. An hour later, when they disconnected Emily from the machines, I remained at her side, clasping her hand still faintly warm, still unmistakably hers. I vowed to her silently that this would not be how it concluded. Then my phone vibrated. A text from my brother-in-law, a Navy SEAL currently posted 2 states distant. He had learned of the tragedy. He was en route already. I had barely pulled out of the hospital lot when I spotted his truck matte black, engine idling with a deep, menacing rumble. James emerged into the downpour, jacket drenched, but his gaze razor sharp. 12 years of service had stripped away any tendency toward unnecessary speech. He approached without preamble, and placed a firm hand on my shoulder. "She's gone?" he asked in a low voice. I gave a single nod. He glanced beyond me toward the manicured streets that sprawled like a self-satisfied fiefdom under HOA dominion. "Then let's move." The ride home passed in heavy quiet, broken only by the rhythmic scrape of wipers against the windshield. My thoughts looped endlessly on Karen's smug expression, while beside me, James's features grew progressively more resolute with each passing mile. When we turned into the cul-de-sac, Karen was already positioned outside, as if she had sensed our arrival. Her porch light snapped on, illuminating her like a stage. There she stood, clipboard once more in hand, as though it were armor. "Mr. Dalton," she began smoothly, "I was so sorry to hear about your wife. A terrible misfortune. But perhaps now, the residents can finally meet community standards." James exited the vehicle before I could respond. Composed, deliberate, lethal in his restraint. "Are you the individual responsible for removing the ramp?" he inquired. Karen gave a dismissive sniff. "I carried out the association's directives." "Yes." The vote was unanimous. He advanced one measured pace. "So you deliberately ensured a woman unable to walk could no longer access her own home. And that gives you satisfaction?" Her jaw rose defiantly. "This isn't about feelings. It's about adherence to policy." He held her stare for several long seconds, a silence thick enough to press down on the chest. "Your policy ended her life," he stated evenly. "You ended her life." Karen emitted a brittle, uneasy laugh. "You have no right to address me in that manner." At that instant, Sirens pierced the night. Patrol cars swept around the bend, emergency lights strobing crimson and sapphire through the lingering rain. They were not there for him. They were there for her. While we had been at the hospital, a neighbor's surveillance recording had spread rapidly online. It captured Karen directing hired landscapers as they tore apart the ramp even as Emily remained inside the house. The video recorded it all. Her commands, her amused chuckles, her unmistakable features. I observed, as the officers secured her wrists in cuffs, while she protested vehemently above bylaws and enforcement. Vehemently. James remained motionless. He simply regarded her and said, "You violated your own standards, Karen. You lost sight of basic decency." As the patrol car drove off, I released a long, shuddering breath. The rain had finally ceased. The street returned to stillness, not tranquil, merely hollow. I stood gazing at the splintered remnants where the ramp once stood, and murmured into the damp air. All she wanted was to come home, and standing there next to a man who had faced combat on distant shores. It struck me that this petty neighborhood conflict had exacted a heavier toll than many actual wars ever would. If this story resonated with you, please tap like. It's our way of reinforcing that basic kindness still holds value. Subscribe to Karen's Hub to stay updated on authentic accounts of individuals who stand up and refuse to stay quiet. And share in the comments, if this unfolded on your block, how would you respond?